Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Chang. I work for the organization KUA Aina Ulu Awamo, which means grassroots, growing through shared responsibility. Our acronym KUA means backbone. We serve as a backbone mechanism to help our Malama Aina communities to convene, share, learn, and when they find common ground, empower each other to better care for Hawaii. For the last couple of years, we've been holding what we call Koʻa calls. Like Koʻa serve as an aggregation device for feeding and helping fish thrive and grow, but also helping organize them for harvest later in the year. We think of our Koʻa calls as a place to gather and consume information and learn to participate in the governance and care of our resources. Ginger, can you play a little short on KUA, and then we'll get into the real agenda.
KUA Aina are the grassroots rural people of Hawaii. Ulu is to grow. Awamo is the carrying stick, used to shoulder the weight of many. KUA Aina Ulu Awamo means grassroots growing through shared responsibility. KUA is a backbone organization that supports networks of communities across Hawaii. They are fishers, farmers, fish pond kia'i, and limu gatherers. Together, these practitioners, educators, researchers, and community stewards are working toward a shared vision in Aina Momona, rich, abundant ecological systems that support community well-being. These experts of land and sea hold wisdom and solutions for some of Hawaii's most difficult social and environmental problems. Your support helps us respond to the needs of our communities. It helps build a better and more just future for generations to come.
Thank you, Ginger. Mahalo, everyone. I see more people coming in. Just so you know, we will be taking questions. However, those questions should be addressed to Ninao or questions or Ginger, who's in the chat. And what we'll do is open up, have Dawn introduce herself, and then work through some questions we've already set forth. And hopefully we'll have time to take questions. And Dawn has graciously said she would also do her best to provide us answers to questions that we're not able to get to. So Dawn, thank you for joining us. What I'm just going to do is read, I think, a quote that's very important to our work. If I can like minimize my screen, yeah, which I can't seem to do now. Shucks, I can't. For some reason, my Zoom screen blew up, and now I can't close the thing. Okay, here it goes. It worked. What we'll do, Dawn, is I'll read this statement, and then just open up for you for about 5 minutes to talk about yourself, your background, and your aspirations for your role. Many of you who have joined us know that Dawn is the current interim chair for the Board of Land and Natural Resources. She is Governor Green's nominee, who will be coming up for confirmation through, I think, the legislative advise and consent process that happens sometime in the next month or two. So Dawn, the Hawaii State Constitution makes clear that our natural and cultural resources, including our nearshore marine resources, are subject to the public trust and therefore must be managed and protected for the benefit of present and future generations. The Hawaii State Constitution further requires the state and its agencies to protect and enforce Native Hawaiian rights, including traditional and customary practices associated with and dependent upon the carefully managed and abundant nearshore resources. I just wanted to say that in regards to our community networks really came out of grassroots Malama Aina efforts to care for the nearshore, some of which I think you are familiar with. But if you could give us in the next 5 minutes a little of your background and your aspirations for the BLNR, and then we can start asking questions.
Okay. Aloha mai kākou. My name is Dawn Chang, and I am greatly appreciative to KUA to provide this platform as an opportunity to, one, tell you a little bit about myself and then answer any questions. So let me tell you a little bit about my genealogy. My mother is Edna Kealoha Paole Ho'okano. Her father was Kamiko Ho'okano. His father was Willie Ho'okano. And his mother was Louisa Cook Ho'okano and Iosepe Ho'okano. We are from the Ahupo'a of Kahalu'u on Oahu, and that is my ohana. My ohana are the Ho'okanos, the riders, Kalahikis, Awas, McCabe's, and we are Lavaya. My uncle were fishermen in Kaneohe Bay. One uncle was a squid man, my uncle Harold, and another uncle, he caught kona crab. But we are from the Ahupo'a of Kahalu'u. We also have Kuleana lands at Mauka. We were involved in a 25-year litigation with an adjoining landowner, Andy Anderson, who bought an interest in one of our family and then filed a quiet title and partition action. So we have for 25 years been litigating, and we established the Ho'okano Family Land Trust. And that land trust was designed as a process to help us preserve and protect those lands. The case has been resolved. We entered into a settlement agreement, but it did, so we ended up getting access, but it did, we ended up having to convey one of our Kuleana parcels to Mr. Anderson's son. But my tutu is buried on our Kuleana land. And she is in a marked grave because our family, my mother's family, could afford a tombstone. Next to her are several family members who either have a tea leaf or they have pohaku or they have other plants around them, but we all know who's buried there. So, I aloha, and I do have great concerns and cares about Iwi Kupuna and my ohana. My grandfather was Higa man. He had a koi factory on Waihe'e Road, right above Key Project, where you are, where Kevin is. And I remember growing up with steam burlap bags, smelling the poi as it was being processed. So that's a little bit about my ohana. I have 3 children and 7 mo'opuna, and I am blessed beyond what I deserve. Professionally, in 1973, I was going away to school. I graduated, and then Marian Kelly, I asked her if she would be an advisor for me during a summer. So I worked on a project on the Great Mahalo. After I did that report, I was angry, I was hurt, but I was trying to find a way to how do I channel that. So I went on to, I got my master's degree in social work because I really believed in empowering the community and through community organizing. So I was doing a community organizing in Waimanalo, along people like Gwen Kim, Dennis Kauahi, Tom Tizard, and people like Auntie Lydia Hale in Waimanalo. But what I realized as a social worker is that the challenges that our Hawaiian community was facing were not only individual, they were systemic. So mahalo to CJ Richardson, because he had established his vision for the law school, provide access to affordable legal education for local students, local residents. But it was also with the Kuleana that you would provide access to legal services with that education. But I went to Richardson School of Law, graduated, and then clerked for Judge Walter Heen for 2 years. I begged him, please let me stay here. And he said, no, go out and get a real job. So I had to go out, and I worked for the Attorney General's office at the end of 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and the early 2001. That was a historic period at the AG's office. Kaho'olawe in 1994 was transferred back from the Navy to the state. And I remember the commissioners asking me, because I was their counsel, they said, Dawn, should we take it back? I said, as your lawyer, I recommend no. Too much liability, not enough money, and not enough time. However, as a Hawaiian, of course you have to take it back. That is the only way we're going to get Kaho'olawe. So it was an exciting time. Past decision came down. What does traditional customary practices mean? We had hotels worrying that Native Hawaiians were going to be running through their lobby, picking all the flowers. So it was we were entering a new phase of Hawaiian Renaissance, the Burial Council. We had discoveries of iwi kupuna on Maui, which ended up into Act 306, the burial laws. But it was an extremely exciting time. And I was one of two Native Hawaiian lawyers who worked at the Attorney General's office. But what I also found at the Attorney General's office is matters would come before the Land Board and the Water Commission. And for the first time, that's how the communities heard about these projects. So what I decided to do was to leave the Attorney General's office and open a small consulting practice, which worked on utilizing my social work skills as a facilitator to find opportunities to facilitate conversations that historically our disenfranchised communities, primarily Native Hawaiians, were not given a seat at the table to genuinely engage. We checked off the box. It said, oh, due process, you have to have a meeting for an EIS, but there wasn't genuine engagement. The land board would be angry because here you had people who came to them upset about a decision, and you had the communities who were angry because they didn't know about it. So a lot of my work as a consultant, and I don't think people really maybe understood, I don't advocate. My work as a consultant is to create the safe spaces for good conversation, including like federal recognition. It was to facilitate those hard discussions, but it was to create the safe space for those kinds of discussions without feeling intimidation. So now I have the opportunity I have greatly appreciated the governor's nomination of me as the first Native Hawaiian woman to serve as the chairperson of DLNR. Also, as part of our Hawaiian leadership is Laura Ka'akua, who I'm sure many of you know. She is being nominated for the first deputy, and Kaleo Manuel to continue to be the deputy for Water Commission. So that's a little bit about me, where I come from, my education, as well as my professional background. But I have some visions for DLNR that I'd like to share, and then you can ask me questions. These are the things that I've shared with the department staff. One, I want greater community engagement. When a matter comes before the board, I want to know that the matter has been vetted by the community. I'm not saying that a certain outcome is going to occur, but I want to know that the community has been given an opportunity to genuinely engage in the matter before it comes to the board. Two, greater collaboration and partnerships with communities. DLNR cannot steward all of these resources, 1.3 million acres of land, all of our beaches, all of our state parks. We cannot do it. The people in the community are the best stewards. So we want to try to provide tools for the community to partner with us. I realize that many people in the community may not trust government. We've not kept our promises. We've not done a very good job. I'm not saying that this is going to happen overnight, but I am committing to you to engage, whether it's community-based subsistence fishing areas, whether it's working with state parks like Kaena, but it is to engage the communities who know your areas better than anybody else. So that's my intention, is to have greater collaboration and partnerships with communities on stewarding the resources. I am a process person. I'm not substance. I said I am too makule to micromanage DLNR agencies. They are good people. I am so blessed to have just good people working at DLNR who want to be here. I want to give them the tools to do what they need to do to steward these lands in partnership with the communities. I'm process, so what I'm going to promote is a fair, open, and transparent process. We're not here to advocate for projects. Projects have to stand on its own merits, but I am going to advocate for a good process. Finally, I want to recognize Indigenous knowledge, that we need to find balance between both scientific, contemporary research, but also recognizing that Indigenous knowledge, people have lived for generations on this land who probably know it better than anybody else. And we don't give enough credit. So I had the great privilege of working with Hei and Near. And that's been, we had to convince NOAA, Washington, DC, that the Ahupua'a land management system is the right process for this estuary. And the communities told me, Dawn, because I was helping to facilitate those discussions, and they said, if we're going to be required to give up the Ahupua'a land management, it's not worth it to get the federal funds. We would rather do it the hard way. But we convinced NOAA, Washington, DC, that an Ahupua'a land management process to better manage this estuary is the right thing to do. So even I at DLNR will be promoting an Ahupua'a land management as we begin to look at our resources. So that's kind of my mission. That's kind of what the directions have been to DLNR staff in guiding them as they become, as they steward our land. So I don't know, I'm sure that was more than 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Kevin,
more than
but
5
I'm
minutes,
open.
Dawn.
Okay, go ahead. You guys can open it up now. Go ahead. I'll
Thank
stay
you, Dawn.
longer. I'll stay longer.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I think what you said is important to hear at all. I'd like to pass it then on to La'a to ask his
Okay.
question. You there, La'a Kia?
I am here. Sorry, let me get set up. I'll find my oh, there it is. Sorry,
Okay.
everybody.
Aloha.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn, for making some time to join this meeting. My name is La'a Poipoi. I'm from Molokai. And I have, let me read this quick statement, then I'll go into my questions. So Article 11, Section 1 of the Hawaii State Constitution mandates that the state shall promote the development and utilization of resources in a manner consistent with their conservation and in furtherance of the self-sufficiency of the state. So I have a few questions that I'd like to see if you can answer to the best of your ability, of course.
All right.
So first one is, what role does the precautionary principle play in maintaining this delicate balance?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I look at the precautionary method as one being more proactive, that rather than waiting for the damage to occur, if we see signs of degradation, then we should be more cautious. I think that there needs to be balance, but I think we do have an opportunity to be more proactive rather than, like I said, waiting for the depletion of a resource. When we see signs of degradation or diminishment, then we need to take appropriate actions to address that. I hope that answers. I try my best, brother, so just.
Oh, no, yeah, that's all I ask is try your best. Yeah. Okay. So, along with that, I know we came to some of our, you moderated some of our CPSFS open meetings.
Yes.
A few years ago, so yeah, that's good. So my next question is, how do you make hard choices, I guess?
I'm process. I believe if you have a good process, how would I say, a result will arise when people begin to trust each other, when they begin to have an opportunity to share in a candid way, and they're able to come to terms with, rather than focusing on what we disagree on, what do we agree on? Do we agree that the resources are being diminished? If we don't agree on that fundamental question, it is hard to move forward. But my commitment is like I said, it is process. It's creating the place for safe conversations. But I also believe that at the end of the day, a decision needs to be made, but it has to be an informed decision, one that's based upon, one, hearing as much mana'o as we can. It's also looking at the both, like I said, I'm into balancing indigenous knowledge and contemporary science, getting the data that reflects. I would rather, so if we have to make the decision, and I'm not afraid to make a decision, but my preference would be is that the communities would help us in coming up with some options. But at the end of the day, we have to fulfill our mission. But I want to make an informed decision. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my sort of my process is providing everybody. I'm going to listen. I'm going to get good information, give people an opportunity to really participate in a meaningful way, and then make an informed decision. And also provide, we can change. We should be practicing the adaptive management process. As we get more information, then we should change. If it's required, then let's change. I don't believe that anything has to be set in stone, that we need to make, like the precautionary method, we need to make adjustments when we take action. If it's not the right action, or if the action needs to be modified, then we should be ready to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. Can you maybe share a little bit of the insight, or give us an insight into the decision-making process that you, I guess, use in that making hard choices type of deal? Thank you.
You know, I have, most of the projects I've worked on, I don't make a decision. So this is kind of a new role for me to play, is to actually be part of a decision making. But let me explain sort of the process that I use, at least with DLNR, over the last, what day is today? The 17th. That's how long I've been on this. So, but what I've told DLNR staff is, I want to do as much fact gathering. So if there's an issue that comes before DLNR, I said, one, we're going to internally coordinate. If something affects both DAR, land management, and DOFA or DOCARE, I want everybody to come to the table. We're going to have open discussion amongst ourselves internally within the department. I want to know what kind of community engagement or what are the community's concerns, so that when, at least within the department, we can talk very openly and candidly. But when we leave the department, we better say the same thing. Likewise, if we are intersecting with other agencies, whether it be DOT or Department of Ag, whatever, but we also better work with those sister agencies as well. But ultimately, once we gather all the information, we give the community a chance to also participate in the discussion, and we hear their concerns and how we address them, then we make a decision. But sometimes it may not be only my decision, it may be the Board of Land and Natural Resources. But my process is to genuinely hear, give people an opportunity to participate in a meaningful way, not just, oh, come up to a podium and, you got 2 minutes. It is our obligation to come to you in the community in venues that you feel comfortable with. Not all kupuna can come up to a podium. Sometimes face-to-face is much better. Zoom has kind of changed the dynamics in how we communicate. So I think we have to be more flexible. We cannot have meetings from 6 to 8 at night. If community members, they're working or they're taking care of family. So we have to reach out to the community and say, what works best for you guys? So that's kind of the process I'm looking at, is one, doing sufficient fact gathering, having people where we are, it is our kuleana to reach people in venues that they feel the most comfortable. Maybe it's not a large public meeting. Maybe it is more talk story, but it's gathering that both information, and then we make a final decision. Sorry for the long explanation.
No apology necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One final question is,
Yes.
whether or not you do, I'm not sure, but how do you prioritize issues? Or if,
You know, brother, that's kind of a hard one. I mean, for me, it's also, I'm looking at, we serve the people. So I'm always looking, what's the public interest? I'm looking at what does the statute require? What does the law require us to do? We have to be in compliance. But it's also looking at, does it serve the public? To me, that's the priority. It's serving the public before we are serving, it's fulfilling our public trust responsibilities. It's, are we ensuring that the lands are being used for public trust purposes? Are the waters being used for public purposes? Are we creating opportunities for access so we can continue traditional customary practices? And trying to balance that all against, there are other private interests. But for me, we have an obligation, we have a trust obligation. So my priority is looking at, are we fulfilling our trust obligations in ensuring that those responsibilities are being met before non-trust obligations. But I haven't had to make a really hard decision yet. So, and I know you are all going to, the walk is in the talk, right? Easy for me to sit here and tell you stuff, but you guys will evaluate me on what I do. My actions have to speak for myself. So I will ask you to be patient with me, that, let's see what happens when those hard decisions have to be made. Because I know that at some point in time they will be, but that's kind of how I would prioritize things, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Dawn. And
You're
again,
welcome.
thank you for joining us.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. And, you know, I have great mahalo for your father. Is your dad Uncle Mac?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I have great aloha for the work that he has done. So mahalo to that. Okay.
Take it away, Ui.
Okay.
Mahalo nui la'a. Aloha, Dawn.
Aloha.
I'm Uilani Naipo, lineal descendant of Miloli'i, South Kona, on Hawaii Island. The questions that I have speak to a personal experience from my community of Miloli'i.
Okay.
So in August of 2022, Governor Ige came to Miloli'i to promulgate rules for the Miloli'i community-based subsistence fishing area. Since 1994, given the language and authority to DLNR to designate CBSFAs, today, nearly 3 decades,
I know.
we only have 2.
Mm-hmm.
Communities such as Ha'ena, Mo'omomi, Miloli'i, and Kipahulu have worked and continually do this, is to work with the state to advance place-based and collaborative solutions to natural resource management, consistent with Native Hawaiian traditional and customary subsistence practices recognized in our Constitution. It has taken the efforts of existing communities nearly and over 3 decades to pass their rules. How would this change? So here are my questions. What are the barriers can you identify for community-based natural resource management? As BLNR chair, how will you support and expedite the ongoing efforts?
Oh boy, Ui, you have to start off with such a hard question.
Our work is hard. Our communities are working very, very hard. So it should be close to you.
You are absolutely right. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes our barriers are self-imposed. And maybe that's kind of like, at some point in time, you got to make the hard decision to go. And I realized DLNR, we cannot steward, if we want to manage these nearshore resources, so they are here not only for this generation, but generations to come, then we have to act. And we have to act with those who are willing to act with us. So I recognize that there are many moving parts in this. things that may be beyond the people that are sitting on this call. But it is my commitment to this community, especially with respect to those who have been doing community-based subsistence management, that you guys are willing to do this. So we need to be out there to support you. So that means that I'm going to have to do some of the challenging, kind of more political discussions to enable this initiative to continue to move forward. If we want to do 30 by 30, why aren't we doing with the communities who are already willing to do it? So DAR, we are reassessing. I said, I don't care what we call it. I don't care we call it 30 by 30 marine map. I don't care what, we just got to do it. So DAR is looking at reassessing our approach. We're not going to stop. We are going to move forward. I think that we should move forward with those communities who are willing to work with us. So maybe this goes back, like I said, to La'a's comment about, so how you gonna make the hard decision? So that's gonna be up to me to take care of the, some of the political hard things, maybe I gotta do so that the community and DLNR can do what they need to do. I say that to you today, and we'll see, but I recognize that sometimes that is my role. I have to do that as a chair. And maybe it's not going to be easy, but I think it is a matter of how we present it, how we move forward. But doing nothing is the same thing as doing something, right? I mean, it's not, we cannot, status quo is unacceptable, right? We've got many communities that are willing to move forward. So I have told DAR, look, let's sit down and reassess and figure out how we're going to move forward with those communities who want to work with us, especially CBSFAs. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I may not be here tomorrow, but
And so I'm going to scrap my second question, and then I'm going to grab La'a's question, his last question he did, and kind of tie it into this one. So more specifically, when he asked about how do you prioritize?
Yeah.
How do you prioritize the interest? You mentioned this, that you have to, and you're willing to commit to more of traditional practice, indigenous knowledge, and so forth. So in just, you can make up the exercise or whatnot. You can reference any other particular project or issue that has been on the table before, but how will you prioritize traditional, because this is a real thing, especially for Mo'omomi, and you're very familiar with it.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize traditional knowledge voices and testimony against commercial and tourist industry interests?
You know, one, the court has given us guidance on Kama'aina testimony. The Kama'aina testimony is valid, and it should be given due deference. For me, I look at the ancestral connection, those who have been there for generations. And let me just say, if someone came into Kaneohe Bay and went to one of my ohana's koas, and they went and said, "Oh, okay, we're gonna destroy it, or we're gonna," I don't think you're going to do that. I mean, so I think that for me, it is recognizing that those who have ancestral connections, and so for me, there is a difference. It's not just any Hawaiian. You got to show your connection to that place, because with that connection comes kuleana, comes a responsibility to take care. And if our Constitution says that traditional customary practices is a public trust, and it does place commercial, you know, it is a priority over commercial. But I also understand we have to balance. So we have to find a way to balance. But I do recognize, and for me, those voices are extremely important, because when it comes to how do we identify reasonable mitigation? What impact does this proposed use have on those traditional customary practices? And what do we come up with reasonable mitigation? If it's reasonable, then we need to consider that as we make conditions on uses, whether it's a permit or a use. Because if we don't, the Supreme Court has also said you cannot regulate these practices out of existence. But on the other hand, I do want to, and this is what I told the department, we need to do a better job of educating. We spend a lot of time at DLNR regulating and enforcing, but we have to do a better job at regulating. So for example, we got to do a better job at educating commercial fishermen about why the protection of traditional customary practices is so important, that how we can live sustainably together. So I mean, part of this is our responsibility that we're not doing enough at DLNR. So I said, we have to make that effort. And so I met with the Fishers Working Group. I think that there is more in common than not, and maybe I'm naive, I might be naive, but I think that there is a way to reconcile, but I understand that I am guided by the Constitution as well, because if I don't, somebody gonna sue me, and I have a much better chance defending my actions if I do it based upon the Constitution. Like I said, I may not have a job tomorrow, but this is at least, at least this is what I can tell you today, because those are the principles that I'm guided with, right? It is the law.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And, you know, I just want to close with, not only do I mahalo you for being well-versed in the language, right? You take it from a perspective of just understanding the important definitions of each one.
Yeah.
And so keeping in mind that community-based subsistence fishing area and defined within there that the S, subsistence, is further defined in law by traditional and customary and
Right.
religious practices.
Right.
So again, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny of Pupukia.
Okay, mahalo. Are you? I'm related to Naipos too, but I don't.
And Timia.
Yeah, it's a
Timia. Yeah.
Okay. It is a very small community, so no, thank you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you, Jenny. Go ahead.
Mahalo ui. Aloha, Dawn. It is nice
Aloha.
to meet you. I haven't had the opportunity like some of the other folks have to meet you, so nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I am Jenny Yagodich. I am from the Ahupua'a of Pupukia out here on the beautiful north shore of Oahu, where I actively work in nearshore marine conservation, education, and stewardship.
Okay.
So here's my question. I'm just going to read it the way it's written here, and it's a tough one, but we're going to go there.
Okay.
So right now, the Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement is severely underfunded, under-resourced, and not fully able to successfully uphold its natural resource enforcement responsibilities. How will you ensure DoCare has the resources it needs so they can effectively and proactively enforce the rules and regulations in place to protect our natural and cultural resources?
You're right. That's a hard question. I will tell you, we are just graduating. Well, the legislature gave us 42 positions, might have been last session. And you know, all of those 42 have remained in the academy. We're going to graduate all 42 of them. And they come from a variety of backgrounds. So those 42 will be employed statewide. I think there's 14 on Oahu, Hawaii Island, Kauai, and Maui. So and they get specialized training. We've also requested an additional 12 positions. So we're trying to give DoCare the capacity to do what needs to be done. But I also believe that we have to do a better job again. And, you know, I'm sorry if I'm like repeating myself, but enforcement to me is the last resort. we have to first try with education, collaborate more with organizations like yours to really use that as a platform to educate the community about, why we have to protect these resources. Self-enforcement to me is the best, rather than having to send out doe care or other enforcement. But I'm not afraid to enforce. I'm not afraid to say, if your house is, your sandbags are hindering public access, I'm not afraid to enforce that. But I do, again, recognize that self-enforcement is a better form if we, if our partnerships with community are reaching out to those stakeholders. And I also believe, and maybe I'm naive, but people generally don't want to be disrespectful. They just don't know any better. So we have to help them. We have to educate them. And if you continue to violate, then we're going to do something about it. But I think it is our job to do more interpretive signs, to work with communities about putting out more educational information through brochures. But I'm not afraid to have a presence of doe care out there to do what needs to be done. So we're trying to build up the capacity for doe care, but at the same time also trying to work with, the prosecutors to ensure that when those citations come up, they get enforced. But also, on the other hand, it is an educational campaign. It's trying to collaborate with our community partners to educate those stakeholders who are using that resource and may not be as ma'a in why we protect and why we preserve. But I do want to have faith that sometimes if people know better, they're not going to act, with disrespect. So that's kind of my approach to one giving doe care the capacity, but also on the other hand, also working on doing an educational campaign. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn, for that. I totally love what you're saying about education.
Yeah.
Our community was the first Makai Watch community on
Right.
this island, and we are still going strong 17 years later. But just to give you a little bit of a situational example, our district, District 2, goes from Kaena Point to nearly Kahuku and up to Mililani Mauka, including Mauka. It's a pretty large district. In there are state parks, harbors, cultural sites, a marine life conservation district, etc. And for a year and a half, we had one officer in our entire district, and he would be off 2 days a week. So on 2 days a week, we don't have coverage at all.
Yeah.
We recently got a second officer that we're really excited about. So when our community specifically, we do a ton to educate and to help and to sort of be the eyes on the ground and do what we call educational interventions to save doe care's resources, so they don't have to respond when they really don't need to. But in times when we need them, 1-2 officers in a large district just simply isn't enough. And then those officers sometimes don't have the supplies or the tools or the materials or the equipment that they need to effectively respond, say boats for marine patrol units and things like that. So that's where the question is stemming from. And so the next question that was on here was, when can we expect that full capacity to happen? I don't think you're going to be able to answer that, so I'm going to scrap that question. But yeah, so I appreciate your answer to that. And again, I know that was a tough one, but mahalo nui.
But I will tell you, we are working on that. We're also, I'm trying to have greater collaboration with our educational institutions, both the University of Hawaii and the community colleges. If we can develop, a fast track academy program where we can get community college, high school students to explore, doe care as an option, a career option, that really helps us. So we are trying to build capacity within, because having that local knowledge is extremely helpful in enforcing. They bring a sensitivity. So we are trying to be as creative with all the different options to address, the issues of managing the resources and preserving and protecting. So I appreciate all the good work that you guys are doing, Jenny, too. Thank you.
Mahalo, Dawn. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Auntie Tessie.
Okay, thank you.
Aloha, Dawn.
Aloha.
My name is Renee Funoi Moana. I reside in the Ahapua of Hauula in the Moko of Koʻa. I'm a member of several different organizations. Collectively, our kuleana is preservation of cultural practices and stewardship of aloha aina. Recently, the state of Hawaii has pivoted toward a destination management action plan for tourism. In light of the strain that tourism can put on our resources, how would your administration support the balance between visitors and our natural environment?
Excellent question, Auntie. Our state parks, they're doing a reservation system like for Diamond Head and Haena. And what they've noticed is that they've diminished, for example, Diamond Head. We used to have up to 6,000 people daily going up to Diamond Head. With the reservation system, we've cut that in half to 3,000. The visitor experience is much better, but we also reserve spaces for local residents to come for free. Parking is, so we are trying to use that model in other, and Haena is a great example of collaboration with the community, where the community has, they've kind of led the discussion on what is reasonable, what is a reasonable experience and management of Haena. And they've stepped up to the plate to actually be part of management. But we are also looking and utilizing that as a model to take out to our other state parks. And so I think what we're trying to do on our end, especially with state parks and state facilities, is how do we better manage those resources? So one, for me, it is, we have to make sure that local families have an opportunity to visit first. I mean, it breaks my heart. My kids will never be able to go to Sacred Falls, right? And we all grew up over there, right? They will never be able to go there. I mean, we don't, so many of our local residents, they don't go to these state parks or facilities because it's too crowded. So what our strategy is through state parks, it's one, to have a managed experience. We recognize and a lot of visitors are willing to pay. So it is to pay a reasonable fee so that they have to pay for to visit those parks. Local residents are free, but it helps to maintain our facilities, because once we open up to that, when we're going to charge people, we need to make sure that our facilities are operational and in good condition. But we have a strategy to begin to open up a lot more state park facilities with balancing the visitor experience by charging the users, the non-resident visitors, but still at the same time creating a space for local people to come and visit. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with our state parks, and likewise with our trails and access system. It's really to first kind of taking care of our local people, but also charging visitors to come and enjoy those same resources.
Mahalo. Under the DMAP, which is the Designation Management Action Plan strategy, what specifically would you like to see change in how Hawaii manages tourism?
I'm not really familiar with that plan, but I will tell you, I think what we're trying to do at DLNR is it has to be an educational experience as well. We have to do a better job of having interpretive signs. We have to do a better job of educating the visitor about the resource. I'm all about storytelling. We got to tell the story about that place. So when the visitor comes, they understand who lived here? What was this place all about? What are the names? And we're also trying to bring back Olelo. I mean, let's bring back those names that represent that place. So while I may not be as familiar with this DMP plan, our strategy at DLNR is to do more education in our facilities. Interpretive signage. It's also to tell them, you would hope people would have code of conduct. They would know how to behave, But sometimes you got to tell people how to behave, how to be respectful. What are the resources that are here? Stay on the trail. Don't go near alley someplace else. You know, so I think what we are trying to do is, one, make it a responsible visitor experience where you're learning about the area, so you know why it's important to be respectful, but they walk away knowing a little bit more about that place than when they came. So that's our strategy at DLNR. It is to tell stories. I told our staff, we got to do a better job of telling stories. We're not doing a good enough job, and we have such wonderful stories to tell. So that's sort of my challenge to DLNR. It's let's do better storytelling. Okay,
Mahalo,
Auntie?
Dawn, appreciate your time. And I'm
No,
gonna
of
turn the
course.
time over to Kevin.
Okay,
Thank you, Auntie. Hey, Don, we have about 20 minutes before our stop, so I'm gonna just try to, it looks like over 20 questions have come in.
Ooh,
So I'm gonna try to shoot them to you, and
okay.
it's obvious we have skeptics on the call. So I'm gonna try to
That's
shoot
all
them
right.
to you and see how quickly you can answer them, okay?
Okay, all right.
So, first question, if confirmed to be the BLNR chair, what is your viewpoint on how you would respond to legislative interference, backdoor dealings, and bully tactics based on personal opinion in the administrative rulemaking process?
Yikes. How am I supposed to answer that question? That, the legislative process is as it is. Part of it is, it's a two-way street. The community, and this is what I'm beginning to fully appreciate and understand. The communities have power. You guys have to call the legislators too and tell them how you feel. We can only do so much as a department. What I have asked this administration, and I do believe the Green administration is going to adhere to this, it's about creating the safe space for us to have candid conversations. But when we walk out of the room, we better hear of one voice. And a question was asked to me, so Dawn, what happens if you disagree with the governor? What are you going to, I said, I have two choices. I can suck it up and move on and just follow the decision. Because I serve I said, I wasn't elected, the governor was elected. Or I can suck it up and I can walk away, but I cannot talk stink. I have to walk away. If it violates my personal values and integrity, I don't know if that answers the question. I have no control over the legislators. All I can do is provide them good information to support recommendations that we're making. But likewise, I would tell the community, you also need to let the legislators know how you feel, because they are paying attention.
Thank you, Dawn. This next question is, in your recent HPR interview, you made the point several times that in your work with controversial clients, you are not advocating a position. You are a consultant and not their attorney. If confronted with an issue, say like Koʻa, what would your position be? And how do you see your role as DLNR chief when issues like that come before you?
Being the DLNR chairperson is a little different than being a consultant and a facilitator. Let me briefly explain. My role as a facilitator has been to design a process, working with the clients. And yes, many of them, they're federal agencies, they're state agencies, they're private developers, but it is to design a process that genuinely seeks to engage the stakeholders. If you're going to build a development, are you working with the cultural descendants to try to determine, are there iwi kupuna in the area? So it's really trying to educate them about how to make their project better. So one, as a consultant, my role was to provide both counsel to the client about how do you engage the community in a proactive way. It was also to design a process where we genuinely engage the community. Don't expect community people to just come to one public hearing and come up to the podium. Your responsibility as a developer is you have to go out. And I would tell the client, it is I'm not here to advocate for your project. Your project has to stand and fall on its own merit. I'm here to design a process to engage communities that have historically not been given a seat at the table. I'm not saying that they will get what they're asking for, but they genuinely have to participate in a meaningful way so that ultimately the client makes an informed decision. My role as a DLNR chairperson will be a little different. In some instances, I have to enforce the laws and make a hard decision. But as I try to explain, my process is, it is to listen, it's to hear from my division staff, it's to ensure that the communities have had a genuine opportunity to participate in a meaningful way. If we're talking to kupuna, we better go out to kupuna. When we're having a public meeting, we better create a space for kupuna to sit in the front. They should be able to testify first. So one is sort of trying to design a process that creates a safe space for good conversation. May not be satisfying to all, but that's sort of my response. Is my role as a consultant was not to advocate. It was to design a safe, a process to genuinely engage the community.
Thank you, Dawn. This question goes in line with that, I suppose.
Okay.
Given your consultant work, what assurances can you provide that you will protect the land and not only the interests of developers? I will follow the Constitution. We have a public trust obligation. So we're not, I'm not here, even as my role as a DLNR chair. When a project comes before us, and I told DLNR staff, our role is not to advocate for that project. Our role is to ensure that the process has been met, that they have, and I also said, when a project comes before DLNR, I want to make sure that it's been vetted by the community. So I want to see right up front in the land board submittal, what's been the community engagement. If you cannot satisfy that, then don't bring the matter to the board, because I don't want controversy or the community to hear about it for the first time at the board meeting. I also believe there's got to be some balance, but I think if people are talking to each other, the community and the developer, I mean, there's been some good projects on Maui that where the developer took a pause and said, okay, I'm going to listen to the community. And he really changed his project around and it became embraced by the community. So that's kind of what I'm trying to promote, is trying to get developers to realize, if you work with the community, don't fear the community, embrace them. They can be your greatest ally instead of your obstacle. But my role as DLNR, it is to process. It's not to advocate for unless it is a project that DLNR is doing, then clearly we're going to advocate. But if it's a private developer, we're not here to advocate for their project. We are here to advocate for a process to ensure that all of the regulations have been met. I hope that answers their question, maybe not to their satisfaction. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, so some of these questions are from people who can't be here, but I want to listen later.
Okay, sure, sure.
This question, actually, I like this question. I hope I can articulate it well. As the job landscape changes drastically, inflation and extremely high cost of living in Hawaii, I'm just wondering what the state's plan is for trying to retain good people in conservation jobs and to recruit qualified, passionate locals into this career field in order to stay competitive with other fields that sometimes don't require college degrees and multiple years of experience for minimum pay.
No, I am struggling with that as well. Our vacancy rate at DLNR is about 27%. So one, we're trying to keep the people that are here. We're trying to retain the good people, the people that are working for DLNR. Most of them are here because they want to be here. There's a passion for what they're doing. But we're also working with, I told the department, we're going to have to do a job fair. Let's do a job fair here at DLNR, open up all of our offices and explain to people what we do and have them sign. you know, the state's hiring process, I'm finding out, is a lot more bureaucratic than I thought. You have to be on a DHERD list to be able to get hired. So I said, let's have terminals here at DLNR. As people go through the job fair, have them sign up on that DHERD list so we can begin to solicit, or to, when a job becomes available. But I'm also working with the University of Hawaii. I said, hey, I want to work with your different colleges, student interns. Let them begin to get experience at DLNR in engineering, in forestry, in aquatics, so that they can write that on their resume, that when a position becomes available at DLNR, they've already got experience that we can move them within DLNR. We're also looking at working with the community colleges and high schools. Let them know that this is a career path. It's not all about making money. And this younger generation, you guys are less about making money than about making a difference. And I aloha you guys for that. But I think we need to go out and reach both our partners. You guys are already doing that in the community, but there are young people who are looking for a career path. So that's what I'm looking at, is we need to fill our vacancies. We need to train. The other thing I want to do as well is, and I've been talking to the university about this, and I'm really serious about this indigenous knowledge. We recognize someone who has a PhD, but we don't recognize a kupuna who has lived there for 90 years. And that's the first person you're going to talk to if you're going to do a project in that area, because that kupuna knows more about that area than anybody else. But we don't recognize indigenous knowledge when we've got applications. So we have to, and I'm trying to figure out how I do that, but I'm told the university, you guys got to create a certificate for indigenous knowledge. Give them credit for what they know, so that we can translate that into job qualification. So, brother, I am trying to do all kinds of creative ways to bring more people into DLNR. But that's what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Dawn. Here's a question for clarification, I think, because earlier you mentioned the 30 by 30 and how it would continue. We have heard that you recently announced the Holomua initiative will be on pause.
Yes, let me clarify that.
Mm.
Pause doesn't mean we're stopping. All pause means is, okay, let's reassess the track that we were on. Because at that informational briefing, and Kevin, mahalo to KUA to being there, as I think you provided a perspective that was very helpful at that the Senate informational briefing. So I said, we need to demonstrate that we've heard people. You know, I sat through I sat through a Fisher's working group meeting. I will continue to make myself available to sit, to participate in various meetings. But the pause doesn't mean we're going to stop, because clearly we're not stopping. The resources are continuing to be diminished and degraded as we speak. All I'm saying is the pause is like, do we call it 30 by 30? Do we call it something? I said, I don't care what we call it. We got to manage our nearshore resources. So that's all the pause is. The pause is not a stop. The pause is internally within DLNR. Let's gather all the information that we got from the Maui meetings you guys had, from the Fisher working group meetings, from the informational briefing, from whatever we've heard. Let's figure out, do we need to modify our approach to reaching out to these communities? Okay, I hope that answers your question. Not a pause, and we're not stopping. We are Holomua. We're still going forward. It's just how we going forward. So we're still going forward.
Thank you, Dawn. Here's another interesting question. Do you support requiring fair market rent be paid by observatories in the U.S. military using state lands?
Wow. That is, that is a very difficult question. In my view, that is a question that's going to be posed to the authority. The authority will determine, and I want to let that process go forward. That authority now has, by statute, been given the responsibility to come up with a management scheme for Mauna Kea. So I want that process to go forward without interference. Because of the work that I previously did on Mauna Kea, the comprehensive management plan, and then more recently, the independent assessment of DLNRs, of the UH's implementation, I have chosen not to be the DLNR representative on that authority. I've asked the first deputy, Laura Ka'akua, to sit as a representative on that authority. I said, I don't want, they got a hard enough job as it is. I don't need to be the distraction on that authority, but I am going to leave that decision about what gets charged for observatories to that authority to vet out and make recommendations. I'm punting, but I don't, because I think that is the right thing for me to do. It is not my kuleana, it is right now in the hands of the authority, and I don't want to unnecessarily interject when they are still trying to move forward.
Thanks, Dawn. Any thoughts on the green fee idea?
You know, I think that is, and I don't know enough about it. I've just recently read the legislation. I think conceptually it's a very good idea. I think we're trying to reconcile that with what State Parks is already doing. We are charging a fee for some of our state parks, and we would like to incorporate that in a lot of our other parks. So I believe there's a place, and you know, we need to find out what's the most efficient way to manage the visitor experience. Who should be paying? How much should they be paying? I don't disagree with that. I'm just looking at sort of what's within our kuleana. You know, the governor did make the announcement about the climate change bill. I mean, I think he is committed to putting necessary resources to ensure that, one, we can address some of the hard questions related to climate change, but I also think he's trying to empower DLNR with resources that we need to manage our resources as well. Okay.
Thank you, Dawn. Let's see, it's 4:12.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm trying to sort through some of the questions and
I will leave it up to you, Kevin. You can send me the questions if they're grouped, and I will try to respond to them, and I'll send them to you for your distribution.
okay. Yeah, well, I think we will stop it here, and I'll pass on what we have left.
Okay.
We just want to thank you for taking the time. Wanted to also everybody understand it, because someone did ask, oh, how are you serving as a chair? And so Dawn serves as the interim chair as nominated by the governor, and then she goes through a process with the legislature. And so I encourage you all to get involved in that if you're interested, for whatever position you may have about the nomination, and just be involved in government. When we hear about the hearing, we'll try to get the word out to you, but I think it also behooves you to learn about how the process works. It's very messy, but there's a lot citizens can do.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that, Kevin. Yeah, I am subject to confirmation. Both Laura Ka'akua and I. No date has been set. It will be heard before the Senate Water Land, Senator Inouye's committee. So yeah, I would encourage you, if you've got both, you know, opposition or support, you should let the senators know. The process is, as Kevin said, it is quite complicated, and it is quite, and I suspect that I have a hunch they're going to save me to the very end. So it probably won't be until probably like around April, but they will give notification, and I'm very confident KUA will let people know. But there is an opportunity to provide written testimony I'm not sure if they'll take oral testimony as well. But you know, we have to take advantage of all these platforms. And so you should voice your opinion one way or the other. I have greatly appreciated KUA for providing me this opportunity to share my mana'o and sort of my vision for DLNR. Like I told Ui, I may not be here tomorrow, so you guys better take advantage of me as long as I'm here. But I mean, I think that I wish people would look at this as we have a Native Hawaiian leadership at a time when we need healing with the Hawaiian community on so many different issues. And I think what we bring is some sensitivity and values. And so, you know, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of your conversation. I look forward to more opportunities. And if you send me the questions, I'll follow up. All right?
Thank you, Dawn.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Mahalo. Ahui ho.
Ahui ho.
Ahui ho.